welcome back to the Talkoffamepod podcast with your host, Kyliemontigney. And join us on the podcast, we have Dr. Maureen O'shaughnessy, who is a career educational activist with over 30 years of transforming learning in schools to better serve all students, along with being the founder of the Leadership Preparatory Academy, a nonprofit progressive micro school in Washington State, and author creating micro schools. A colorful mismatched kids, a step-by-step process that empowers frustrated parents in Innovate Education. Thank you, Marie, for taking the time to come on the podcast. We're very excited to speak with you and learn more about what you do.
Thank you for having me, Kylie. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much. So, first of all, where did transformation in education begin for you? What made you kind of want to start out like this?
Well, I got to, as young as elementary, I got to help other kids that struggled more, and school came pretty easily to me. And I just saw such a range of student abilities, and I just could see that one size doesn't fit all. So I did a lot of volunteering. And then when I was a teacher, I saw that too and got to start a gifted program for kids and a pull out enrichment thing one day a month just to give them more so they wouldn't get bored. And then I got to start a school within a school in a high school that was too big to help at-risk kids have a community so they wouldn't drop out. So I see a need, and I've been lucky that I get to do something about it.
It's crazy that you started at a young age and you realize that. Because I know a lot of people don't really realize that at such a young age at elementary school.
Yep. Yep. I'm lucky.
And you served as head of school and principal internationally in Kuwait, Peru, Hungary, Ecuador, the Philippines, and Costa Rica. Your daughters attended these schools as well, right?
Uh-huh.
And how is this different from or the same as leading schools in the United States? Is it different, or is it's kind of the same?
So something that's the same is that I was in American schools and international schools, so we had a similar curriculum, and a similar approach. The U.S. approach, or the North American approach, tends to be a little more creative and problem solving than some of the countries I were in that had more of a lockstep kind of approach. Also, parents care deeply about their kids, whether it's Kuwait or Peru or the US. So that's a similarity. A difference, I think, is that an American school overseas was usually a place for affluent kids to go. And so I could really see the disparity where in the US, with our middle class, schools tend to be a mixture of socioeconomic groups.
With your kids, did it just go as I can't remember the word, but is it kind of did I say schools, but do it in a different country, right?
Exactly. And with kids from like 40 different nationalities. So they were learning to eat sushi and seaweed when they were in second grade because they had great friends from Korea. So yeah, it was American curriculum, but an international population.
That's crazy. That's definitely something I want to do. Is that even though I don't know it's totally different, but then it's I wonder how things will kind of be different in a different country like Italy or England. I wonder because I know every country is different in terms of education purposes, but I wonder is it any place the same in terms of education wise?
Yeah, it really every country has its own unique pieces, but there are some commonalities, especially across the English speaking education, and same the French speaking education systems have some similarities regardless of which country they're in. So some similarities based on the language, it seems like.
Did you have to learn? Did you or your kids have kind of have to learn different languages in terms of going to school in those countries, or it was kind of oh, you can just use kind of your native language and just go to school there? I mean, I know every country in school is different.
Right, because it was an American or an international school, instruction was in English. But the second we stepped off campus, we had to be able to understand how to communicate in the Hungarian grocery store. So we had to be able to count, say please and thank you. And this was before you could just grab Google Translate to communicate. So we did a lot of gesturing and sign language in Kuwait and in Hungary because we don't speak Kuwaiti, Arabic, or Hungarian. In the Spanish speaking countries, my girls became fluent and I speak Spanish. So that was easier to get around in the cultures.
Like, how did you guys kind of manage all that, like learning different languages, even though like this was kind of like before like social media and all that stuff, right?
So kids' brains are just sponges. So the girls picked up Spanish really easily, and we had primed it before we left the US. They had babysitting with Mexican families. And so when we arrived in Kuwait, they were 1 and 3 and spoke Spanish and English pretty equally. And then we were able to keep it going by living in a lot of Latino countries.
Ooh, that's amazing. I know like a lot of people do not like know the language until like they get there, and then when they talk to people, they're like, "What are you saying? Like, what's going on?"
Hmm.
And then you have to use like Google Translate, or they'd be like, have to kind of write it down. But
Right.
but like, how did overseas work impact you as a leader and as a mother?
I think that it really opened my eyes that there are so many different ways of living and learning and commonalities that families care about their kids and they have deep values. And yet, differences just things are different in every place and you don't even understand until you get there. Like, is it, is your greeting, do you kiss cheeks on one cheek, on two cheeks, on three? Do you do three kisses? I've been in countries that do each of those. And do you start on the right or the left? And just cultural norms and how things are done. Like you drink tea in Kuwait before you talk business. You have this courtesy and this civility before you get down to the business. So every place we've learned things and we've been stretched. So I think that impacted me in my schooling, in what I did at school, and definitely what I was able to do with my girls as we traveled. And every break we'd travel to different places and we just got exposed to a lot of wonderful different cultures.
Like, did you like traveling before you became a teacher, or did you like, well, if I become a teacher and I have to travel, I'll just like get used to that. I don't need to complain, or were you just like always like a kind of like a travel person?
I didn't do much travel until I was in college, and I got to study a quarter in Mexico and study a summer in Spain. And that
Hmm.
summer, also do a Euro pass and see all these other countries and take the train from country to country. And I was hooked. So then I traveled spring breaks, everything I could as a young teacher to Mexico. My 5th year of teaching, I taught in Spain. And I knew once I got the doctorate, the kids, the hubby, that I wanted to be back overseas.
Like I'm a big travel person as well. I love traveling anywhere I go, whether it's like out of the country or the state that's like 2 hours away from me. Like any chance I get to travel, like I'll definitely take it. It's just like I'll even though I might be that place I've been to that I'm traveling to a million times, I'm like, at least I get out of the house and do something and travel and get out of where I like my house and something. I'll definitely take it, even to say that I've seen like a million times.
Yep, it's worth it. It's a great way to keep growing.
Mm-hmm. And like, why did you create your Leadership Preparatory Academy? Because I know you started that a couple years ago, but like, why did you kind of like start that academy?
So I had started a school within a school in a large high school. I had started a micro school in the Andes, and then I brought my girls back for high school so they'd have more school choices in English. And we tried a bunch of models, and it didn't work very well for either girl for very different reasons. And so I helped them graduate early and then turned around and opened a micro school where we could meet kids where they were and give them a voice and give them a lot of choices. And I just wanted to make a difference and wanted to make sure kids were seen, heard, and valued. So 10 years ago, I created this micro school in Seattle.
Like was like your girls like inspired? Did you feel inspired by your girls to like start this whole thing, or is it kind of like I really just want to take my teaching and all that stuff to a different level?
I was definitely frustrated as a mom because there had been so much community, such a sense of caring about all of the kids overseas. I'd kind of taken it for granted. And my girls, when they came back, were a little bit more like widgets. The systems were so big and impersonal. I think the teachers cared, but the systems were super structured. And when you have 1,000 kids, you don't have flexibility for one kid that needs something a little differently. So my daughter's situation nudged me. And then I'd also been working as a school leader for quite a while by then. And I really didn't want to be a part of a big school and just kind of keeping the same thing going.
Mhm.
Small and new means we can do the practices that we think are best and not just keep traditional learning going. So it's a lot of work to start a school or any business, but it was really rewarding to address the needs that I wish had been addressed for my daughters.
Because like if you don't like change like the things like your daughters see, I know like with like experiencing that for kind of through your eyes of your daughters that like it can be very hard and you do not know what to do even as a teacher or like a leader of a school and you do not know what to do. Even for me, I'm currently suffering high school and I sometimes have problems like in terms of like what they teach me and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I get confused or like what's I'll be like, what's going on? Like I do not know what's going on. But sometimes like you just need those teachers or the time and energy to kind of ask like, what's going on. But I know that a lot of teachers kind of don't do that. Like I know some teachers do, some teachers don't. That's I just kind of wish every teacher would do that to help kids. I just kind of move back into the US. I know the change is going to be very difficult for everyone, especially if you're in high school or elementary or no matter what grade you are in. It's very difficult for change to kind of transition from a country to country.
Right. Yep. It is difficult for that transition.
And like, tell us about like your tagline of ensuring every child is seen, heard, and valued, and being met while they're academically, socially, and emotionally. Like, how does um, how do you like basically try to get everything right, every child to be seen and heard as a kind of founder of it?
So I couldn't do it in when I was a high school teacher, when I had 5 classes of 30 kids each. And then I had a period of prep and started over again, 150 kids a day. It's impossible in a school day to really see and connect with each student. So our school is a micro school. We cap at 30 students on either campus, and we have one teacher for every 6 kids. And when you're not teaching your class, you're co-teaching in another class. So small and focusing on relationships makes a big difference so that kids are seen, heard, valued, thriving. And we also meet them where they are academically, socially, and emotionally. Sometimes a kid is a rock star academically, but has some social communication pieces they need to
Mm-hmm.
work on. Or sometimes they really struggle emotionally. There's tough stuff going on in their lives, but they're doing great socially in terms of their friends. So with a strength-based approach, we start with what they are good at, and then we support them where they need support in a holistic way, not just in math or English, not just in content areas.
Like how did you kind of like take time for all that? Like I know like with having 150 students it can be very crazy and overwhelming for some part. And like how did you kind of manage to kind of make time for yourself and for your students, even your family at the time?
So with 150 students in a traditional high school, you have them for 50, 55 minutes, and you have a textbook and you know how much you need to cover, and you just move through the textbook and you try to make projects and stuff at the end of units, and so that the kids have some interaction. But going smaller and going project based, we don't have textbooks. So we have themes, and we hit on content and hit on standards, but it's not about covering the content. It's about going deeper and doing thinking and working with others and design thinking and iterations. So it's a totally different approach. And that just seems to work a lot better in terms of thinking.
Yeah, you're right because like even if like you do kind of smaller classes, like it has the kind of like a better chance for kids in high school or lower grades kind of like learn and kind of
Mhm.
more socially interact with teacher and classmates. If you because if you sometimes have that big classes, I know like for me as well, it can be very overwhelming and like kind of if you have a question, like it might take the teacher that you have a long time to answer because no matter how many students they have, it might take a long time or a couple of days or maybe
Mhm.
hours to wait for a response.
Exactly. It's a slower turnaround time when teachers have such large populations to manage and to grade things and to communicate with the students.
You're right on that. And like, what is kind of like flipped learning? I want to ask you, and why do you use that leap tap? Like, what is kind of like flipped learning kind of about?
Yeah, so these two teachers in Colorado were experimenting with this over 20 years ago. And what they thought was, wait, why, if classes are about learning, why are we up here talking the whole period and then students do a little bit of work? It
Mm,
really should be students doing work and we get to help them. So
yeah.
what they did was they flipped it and they created mini videos, and students would watch the videos before class. And so they'd go over, they were in science, they'd go over their science content in a mini video and have a couple questions the kids could respond to. And then in class, they created activities where the students could apply the science, and they moved around and they could help different groups. So they got to coach all period, and the kids were engaged and they could see real time, oh, Kylie, you've got this. So why don't you try this now? Or, hey, Jason, let's back you up because I think you're missing this key point. So they really got to impact learning. And they
Mhm.
knew that in their old model, when they talked at kids, kids tuned out and kids would just memorize for tests, and they would, just copy answers or cut and paste off of Google, so
Mm.
they really wanted the learning and the thinking and to be coaching and helping kids. So they flipped it. And we've taken that model too, and we flipped the learning. So most of our time in the classes is not lecturing, it's kids doing projects and we're guiding them.
Like, do you think like with like all like I know like with some teachers they like to just stand up and just teach the entire class without like kind of like giving their students the kind of like the entire time of work and with helping. Do you think that plays kind of like a big kind of role in like kind of how students kind of learn every day?
I think it does. And there's this model of how to evaluate teachers called the Danielson framework. And it's used all over the United States, and it's based on research. And the highest level of teaching is when, for the most part, you can't even tell who the teacher is in the room. You have the students so empowered, they go and they get their materials and they're working on their projects, and the teacher's just moving around. So when you see somebody up in front of the students talking the whole time, that's not considered the highest level of teaching, because kids are passively listening if they're even tuned in. And that's not the way memory works, by
Mhm.
sitting and being talked at.
Right? And like you are the author of creating micro schools for a colorful mind mismatched kids, a step-by-step process that empowers frustrated parents to know education. Like where did the title come from as like about like schools and stuff?
So it was my third micro school, creating lead prep. And one of the parents on our Kirkland campus, as the kids came running out to the parking lot after school one day, said, oh my gosh, these kids are just these happy, colorful, mismatched socks. And I loved that because they were so unique. They are not nice little white athletic socks all being uniform. They are wonderful, colorful, mismatched socks. And
Mhm.
so that was what I wanted for the book title. And our book actually, a parent designed the cover. She was an amazing graphic artist, and it
Ooh.
has all of these feet on it, just because everybody does. We are unique individuals. And so it was fun to make that the book title.
Ooh, that's amazing. Like, how did this book like lead you to be on Good Morning America and become course for folks who want to open micro school? Like, do you think like the success of the book or people reading it like, kind of led you to kind of get that part of your life and to be on Good Morning America and become a course for folks?
So what happened is this book came out the fall before we locked down for COVID.
Oh, really?
And there was so much talk about pandemic pods, and micro schools were just starting to be heard as a common vocabulary word in conversation. So Good Morning America reached out to me and said, hey, you have this book on micro schools. You have a micro school coalition supporting micro schools. Come and talk on our show. And it was brief, and it was tying into an article they were doing about local pandemic pods. But then more people reached out to me. And so I created a class based on the steps in my book to help people during the pandemic create micro schools.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. Like, was it virtual or was it in person? Because I know Good Morning America has like in-person interviews like a lot.
So mine was virtual, but they went to the home of a family that was doing a pandemic pod. And so they did some live where they were, and my pieces were virtual.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. Like to be on Good Morning America, like that's actually so amazing. But like as a founder of Education Evolution, you have a weekly podcast and LinkedIn newsletter. Like tell us about the types of innovations you unpack on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I love this. It's my hobby. As you, being a
Yeah.
podcaster, I learned so much. So, recently I was talking to Cynthia Jackson, and she works with learners from age 1 up to school, up to kindergarten age, and talks about the nutrition, the learning, all of the things that they need. And this is in a marginalized population, and they have their centers around the US. So, we have the little guys. We have something called P-Tech, somebody that has done business partnerships with high schools, and the business goes into the high school and co-teaches math and does things. And again, for kids that don't have all of the advantages, and the business hires them and does paid internships with them and helps them get into college their last couple of years of high school to do dual enrollment and get certificates. And so whether it's little guys all the way up to big guys, I get to learn about cool things that are happening all over the place. And my hope is that more people, as they listen or read the newsletter, go, hey, we could do something like that here. Hey, I want to talk to that person and find out more about what they're doing in North Carolina in that rural Black school that's so alive. So those are some of the variety of things. And I'm about 170 episodes in. So I have gotten to listen to a lot of amazing innovations.
Ooh, that's amazing. Like that's the best part about doing a podcast and stuff is that like
Mhm.
you get to help people and talk to people and like you get to learn every episode that like you might learn things that you know or even not know. Like it's just the key of growing every day as a person.
Mhm.
And like where can we find your podcast and your newsletter?
So my newsletter is through LinkedIn. And so you could find me at Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy on LinkedIn. And the podcast you can find at educationevolution.org/podcast, or you can find it on Spotify and pretty much any platform.
Ooh, amazing. Everyone go check out our podcast. I totally recommend. And like how do parents kind of like should be looking for a consultant and contact you? Because I know with consulting, it could be very difficult to find people.
Yeah, they can go to educationevolution.org to find me. And I love even just doing free little 15-minute consults, because sometimes parents just need to know of the resources that they have in their area, need to know what questions to ask. And I want parents to have what they need to serve their kids.
Every kid and parent should deserve a good education for their kids, right? Because I know like every parent like, wants the best for the kids and everything.
Uh-huh.
And like the last thing I want to ask you is like you've been a career education activist with over 30 years of transforming schools and founder of the Leadership Preparatory Academy. Like it seems like you can do it all, right? Like it seems like you do everything. But like what progress have you kind of seen in students and the educational kind of unit?
Well, while we really want to dismantle this assembly line, one size fits all system, it's not serving kids, and it really needs to be learning everywhere and in so many ways and so many different possibilities for kids. We are taking baby steps. I think that we have more resources for kids. We have programs outside of the regular systems that the public schools fund. We in many states are letting students express themselves and letting their gender identity be their choice. And I feel like kids are getting safer at that. And maybe I'm speaking
Mm,
for the Seattle area, but I feel like kids are getting more agency to speak up and say, I need this, I want that,
yeah.
this doesn't work. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Also, 30 years ago, we weren't talking about autism. And my older
Oh
daughter
yeah.
has autism. And so it's like so much we're learning and improving in terms of executive functioning and supporting kids. So it's baby steps, and it needs a major overhaul, not just these baby steps, but we are making progress.
Definitely. Because like I know for me, I was too scared to speak up about my education and what I believed in until like 2 years ago. Because I was just a very shy kid and had anxiety. So it's like it's very hard for me to kind of talk about kind of like how I felt and like what I was feeling at the moment, especially in school.
Yeah, a lot of kids haven't felt safe speaking up, and I hope that is changing.
Me too. And I want to thank you so much, Maureen, for coming on the podcast. You are amazing and learned so much from you. And this thank you so much for taking the time. I love chatting with you. And thank you everyone for listening. And I hope you learned as much as I did from Maureen. And thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.